Hello and welcome once again to Cultural Caravan. I'm your host, Ed Werner, who's taking you through this series of Kenosha history of Kenosha County and the city of Kenosha. As you may recall, in episode 1, we got the founding of the community started. Before we get into episode 2, where we should finish the 1840s, I'd like to try to clarify some of the problems that people have been having over the years between Kenosha, Southport, the early Pike Creek, and Pike River. So let's see if we can't clarify that little confusion up. I have here a rough drawing of the area that we're going to be studying and have just finished studying in episode 1. Here is the shoreline off what is now Kenosha, with Lake Michigan over here to the right. North, of course, is the upper part of the chart, going towards the city of Racine. Now, if you'll notice, just within the boundaries of the shoreline, there was a river coming down and emptying out into the estuary here. This was known as Pike River. Over here, a little farther south, is a small stream which had deep water known as Pike Creek, and it flowed with Pike River down the estuary into the lake. Now about 1828, Mr. Montgomery and 2 sons had a log cabin up in the area of Summers. At that time, the Indians had called the whole area Pike. So the word Pike could mean Summers years ago, or any of this area down here. So many times, this area was considered by the name of Pike. Now what happened, Mr. Montgomery moved out of the area, evidently, when Pike Creek began to be developed, because there was at least 35 people here, and having left so abruptly, he probably felt the area was quite crowded. Interesting part here, before the settlers even came, the Pike River ran very close on the northern end of Kenosha to Lake Michigan. And prior to the settlers getting here, the Pike River broke through the land and flowed into Lake Michigan, up here on the north end of the city. That made this area here an island. It was formerly known as Washington Island. We know it today as Simmons Island. It's still called Simmons Island today, and you can see that it actually was once an island. The main force of settlers that came to Kenosha, or the little settlement of Pike Creek, settled in this general area here. They had little cabins scattered about. One was over on Washington Island, a few on the north side. About 1836, a Mr. Turner got dissatisfied with the settlement down here as Pike Creek, and he built a cabin and moved up into this area where the Pike River broke through into Lake Michigan. So this area down on the south side of the harbor was known as the settlement of Pike Creek because it was just south of Pike Creek. Mr. Turner called his little settlement Pike River. So now we have a settlement of Pike River and we have the settlement of Pike Creek. The situation got pretty bad about 1837 when the topographical engineers, which is the Corps of Engineers today, made a survey of the area to find out where they wanted to put in a harbor. They looked at this area up here called Pike River. They looked down here at Pike Creek, and even they got confused. So to take care of the confusion, the settlement of Pike Creek changed its name to Southport about 1837, so it wouldn't be confused anymore. Mr. Turner, in turn, changed the name of Pike River Settlement to North Village. Now we can tell the difference. About 1839, 1840, the topographical engineers came again, definitely had to make a reservation to have a harbor. the settlement of Southport had been sending representatives to Washington, D.C. to lobby for the harbor to be put here. Racine was also interested in the harbor. Finally, a Colonel Albert came to the area, looked the area over for the last time, and said, we're going to put the harbor right here at Southport. That, of course, was the end of North Village. Without a harbor, they had no way of getting any commercial enterprise getting into their little village, so it soon disbanded and became part of Southport. So that gives you a pretty good idea of the confusion that we had when we started out. So now we're into the Southport area. Just to review, in about 1828, the whole area was called Pike, and it was referred to as Pike even though it was Pike River or Pike Creek. Pike Creek was really founded or settled about 1835. Pike River, shortly after the founding of Pike Creek, Mr. Turner went over, founded Pike River in about 1836. Its name was changed to North Village, and when it was absolved by Southport, it ceased to exist. Southport came into being about 1837, and it was really incorporated as a town in 1841. So Southport carried that name until 1850, when the name was changed to Kenosha. It's very interesting to note in the historical files that in 1850, when the name Southport was changed to Kenosha, a lot of citizens didn't like that idea, and they strongly resisted the name Kenosha. They wanted to keep it Southport. And in fact, today, if you look at the phone directory, there are approximately 20 local businesses that still use the name Southport. And even at the lighthouse, we like to say it's Kenosha Southport Light Station. It has a nice ring to it, being the first port that one sees entering Wisconsin. So I hope that kind of clarifies the little problem we had in our last episode. So now, let's look at episode number 2, where we should finish the settlement of Kenosha through the 1840s.
St. Mark's Catholic Church. In the year 1843, the Reverend Martin Kundig came from Detroit and took charge of the Catholic congregation. It was largely through his efforts that this new church building, St. Mark's, was erected. The structure was started in 1844 and completed in 1846. It was consecrated on August 15, 1846. The building was of brick, 72 by 40 feet. The steeple was not built until 1855. It was in the basement of this church that the first free public school classes west of the Allegheny Mountains were held until a school was built 4 years later. The lantern shown with the glass globe was brought from the island of Guernsey in 1842 by Peter Ozanne, an early settler in the township of Somers. The perforated tin lantern is of the style in which a candle was used for the light. This is the Congregational Church in 1842. The religious society called the First Congregational Church of Southport was organized by the Reverend Gilbert Crawford on June 25, 1838. The Reverend C.C. Caldwell was the first minister, serving from July 1838 to July 1839. The Kenosha Church is one of the 4 oldest churches of this denomination in the state of Wisconsin. Once the 18 souls of the congregation had been cemented in holy covenant, a place of worship and a permanent pastor was deemed necessary. The log tavern of Deck Whitney was used, although it was felt that the building was not especially adapted to the use of public worship. In that year, 1839, Mr. Martin P. Kinning, a young man of good education, had opened a select school, which grew into an incorporated academy, the first institution of its kind in the state. This academy was really the first congregational church edifice in Kenosha. It was fitted up with a pulpit and intended for the twofold use of a church and a school. When the businesses of Kenosha moved to the north side of the community, the second church was built on the north side. However, soon the trend of business shifted once again to the south side, and in the winter of 1853, over the ice at a cost of $1,000, the church was moved to the new site on the corner of Ann and Park Streets. That's Sheridan Road and 57th Street. It served at this location until 1875. This is the first Congregational Church in 1874. The new Congregational Church, built in 1874, is located on the corner of Prairie Avenue, that's 60th Street, fronting on Library Park. It is built in Gothic style of cream brick with brown sandstone trimmings and measures 90 by 40 feet, with double towers, one of which supports the spire and the other is topped with a variety of points and decorations. The spire rises 150 feet from the ground. The windows are of stained glass, of tasteful patterns, with various biblical emblems in the arches. The large rose window in the eastern gable is 14 feet in diameter, with the open Bible appropriately enthroned in the center. When seen from within, when the sun is rising in the east, the window presents a rich combination of colors. Overarching the double doors and cut in stone are the words, First Congregational Church. The basement of the edifice is arranged for the Sunday school, Bible classes, infant class, and the social entertainments of the church. The edifice throughout was originally heated by steam and lighted by gas. The entire cost of the structure when completed, including the lot, was $26,000. It was built not by a general contract, but under the immediate care of the building committee. The first service was held in a lecture room on Sunday, March 21st, 1875. The Reverend H.C. Hitchcock was the pastor. The bell in this church was presented to the church by Mr. Edward Bain in November of 1876. On Good Friday, April 17, 1840, the Protestant Episcopal Church of Southport was organized under the name of St. Matthew's Church by the Reverend Lemuel E. Hull of Milwaukee. Services were held in the Academy Building, then a part of the Pennoyer Hotel, and also in an upper room at the corner of Main and Market Streets, that's at 6th Avenue and 56th Street. In 1841, Reverend William Allinson, a native of England, was appointed as minister by Bishop Kemper. Under Reverend Allinson's leadership, plans were made for a new church. Mr. George Kimball donated a lot in 1843 for the construction of a permanent church. The men of the church went to the woods and cut the necessary timber, and a chapel 26 by 42 was built. The new church was located on the southeast corner of the intersection of Market and Ann Streets, or 56th Street and 11th Avenue. By 1878, the congregation built a new church, and the 1842 church was renamed Lyceum Hall, later renamed Apollo Hall, and rented out to the public as a meeting hall for lectures or concerts. On July 1, 1873, the cornerstone for the new St. Matthew's Stone Church was laid by Bishop Armitage at its present location at 59th Street and 7th Avenue. It was formally opened for public worship in July of 1878. This is a replica of the log schoolhouse, District Number 2, that was sometimes called the block schoolhouse. It was a school in which pupils paid a tuition, and it preceded the free public school. The original log or block schoolhouse of 1842 was 20 feet each way, with other dimensions called proportionate. This log school served a variety of public purposes and was one of the most popular of the buildings in the early town. It was 1 story in height, of shingle roof, which was a special feature. A door in one corner was hung with wooden hinges. There were boards fixed horizontally around the interior of the building called counters. These served as desks for the pupils during the week and as an elevated perch for the youngsters during the Sunday service. The principal seats were solid slab benches with a few small ones made of boards. The floor was fairly good, but the ceiling was filled with crevices through which a small boy could climb into the garret. A box stove stood in the center, and near it was a movable table. 2 candlesticks rested upon the table in the evening to give light, and when more light was needed, additional candles were stuck into the cracks in the walls. This picture was copied from the Saturday Evening Post dated April 9, 1842. It shows the spring fashions. The corresponding article in the publication was entitled Evening Dresses. It reads as follows. We introduced a new feature into the Post this week by presenting our fair readers with 2 engraved figures of the latest and most admired London and Parisian costumes for evening dress. The designs are taken from figures forwarded to us from London and are in advance of every other publication whatever. I gave the figures and description any dressmaker produce a similar costume. The article continues saying, figure number 1. It is a dress of rich blue satin, the skirt untrained, and perfectly plain, the body draped with 2 folds a la Victoria. The sleeves very short and trimmed and sweep. Scarf of an entirely new material being composed of a net blue fancy silk. Figure number 2. It is underdress of plain pink satin trimmed with a splendid volant of rich white lace dangled there. An upper short dress of rich gray satin looped up higher on one side than the other with a simple nuad of ribbon, stocker, body ornamented with a splendid lace berth, the corsage decorated down the center with nuads of pink ribbon, gradually enlarging the point of the waist upward. The colors, the most fashionable colors are maroon, Royale d'Ors, greens of different shades, blue, green, and tortuaro. This is the Charles Leet home. The first town meeting of Pike, that is Summers, was held at the Leet House on May 1st, 1843, located on Green Bay Road near Trying Springs. Joseph E. Herbert was chosen as moderator and Oscar Herbert as clerk. All men were duly sworn in, and notice was given of the opening and closing of the post. The house was just standing in 1934 and occupied by descendants of Charles Leet. This mural is considered a very authentic representation of Southport in 1844. It depicts the first pier on the ocean. In 1840, Mr. P.B. Cahoon commenced the construction of an outside pier, which was finished in 1842 and made available for receiving and shipping freight. The first boat landed at the outside pier on April 20th, 1842. Previous to the construction of the pier, all goods and passengers that landed from vessels on the lakes at this port had to be transferred from vessels to the shore by means of a scow that was kept for that purpose. The outside pier built by Mr. Cahoon was the first pier of any kind built directly on the lakes, and the project was considered absurd by most people, both here and other places. The demonstrated unsuitability of this pier to be built into the lake. The captain of the steamboat Wisconsin gathered some guests to watch his vessel destroy the pier. He came alongside, made his mooring lines fast to the pier, and started the engine of the vessel. The engine of the Wisconsin caused no perceptible motion to the pier, and the captain had the satisfaction, or rather dissatisfaction, to see his lines parted and the pier holding its own. This is the Dexter Corners School in 1844. The school was located on a Springbrook Road near the Green Bay Trail. This drawing was made by Miss Catherine Coffib Dexter, great-great-great-granddaughter of John Dexter, who obtained the land from the U.S. government and gave the land for this school. The building was built about 1844 and replaced in 1880. This is the Bachmann Log Cabin in 1845. This cabin was located on the Ludwig Urban Road in the town of Brighton, northwest of Brass Ball Corners. It was built by Mr. Bachmann on 20 acres of land about 1845. The size of the cabin is about 16 by 22 feet. 6 people lived in it, a father, mother, and 4 daughters. This house was built by Frank W. Lyman. It was here that Agnes Lyman Lee was born in 1847. It was later occupied by E.W. Evans, a pioneer lawyer, and still later by P.J. Overacre and D.B. Benedict, who with his wife is in the photo. Later on this site was the hide warehouse of the Allen Tannery. This house, with the home of James H. Stryker on the south and William Bullen's house to the north, then constituted what was one of the best groups of houses in Southport. This monument to Captain August Quarles was erected in Green Ridge Cemetery by the legislature of the Wisconsin Territory and the relatives of Captain Quarles. Kenosha County had sent 100 soldiers to the Mexican War, a greater number than any other county in the state. The commander of the company was Captain Quarles. Quarles was captain of the 15th U.S. Infantry, and he fell at the Battle of Churubusco in Mexico on August 20th, 1847. He was only 26 years old. His body was brought back to Southport, and 2 uniformed companies from Milwaukee and 3 from Chicago were in attendance. There was an immense assembly of people, and the funeral was one of the greatest military displays ever witnessed in Wisconsin. Kenosha erected the first and only public monument in Wisconsin to the memory of soldiers who fought in the Mexican War. The Hageman Hotel in Wilmot was built about 1848. The front is the same as when it was built, but some additions have been added in the rear. This first hotel in the village of Wilmot was built by Ephraim Wilcox, and it was a temperance hotel. It was built when there were no railroads serving that section of the country, and grain farmers used to make up wagon trains, coming from as far as Rockford, Illinois. They hauled their products to Southport over a well-defined trail through the wilderness. Inns sprang up, a good day's drive between, and for many years they flourished with wagon trails coming and going in both directions. This hotel or inn is probably the sole survivor of the old wagon trail days. This home was built by Justine Weed on 25 acres of land about 1848. The master workman was David Warren. The material used was brick for the corners and selected stones that were raked out of Lake Michigan for the walls. These stones, assorted for size and color, were drawn to the building site by oxen. Most of the gathering of the stones was done by Mr. Weed at night after regular working hours. He died before the house was completed. The story was told that a certain young lady of Antioch, Illinois, had 2 suitors and had declared that she would marry the one that built her the best home. Justine Weed was one of the suitors, and to win this young lady commenced the construction of this house. It was said he died of a broken heart when the wedding of this young lady to the other suitor was announced. The walls of the house are very thick. The casings around the windows and doors are paneled. The lath is made from thin boards split to make cracks for the mortar to cling. This is the first free school in the state. It was built in Kenosha in 1849. In February of 1845, as a member of the territorial legislature, Colonel Michael Frank introduced a bill authorizing the legal voters within the corporate limits of Southport to vote taxes on all assessed property, sufficient to support schools. The bill became law and was adopted in the fall of 1845. Classes were initially held in the basement of St. Mark's, later renamed St. James, Catholic Church. Those classes represented the first free public schools west of the Allegheny Mountains. At a school meeting held June 5, 1848, a site for the school building was selected on Wisconsin Street, that is 58th Street, on property donated by Sereno Fisk. Work was commenced and the cornerstone was laid in 1848. The public school of District No. 1 Southport was dedicated on Monday, July 30th, 1849, and the building was opened for school on July 31st, 1849. The site is marked by a boulder on which the story of the first free school in Wisconsin and west of the Alleghenies is told on the attached plaque. The local newspaper, the Southport Telegraph, of August 3, 1849, made the following comments regarding the new school building. The schoolhouse erected in District No. 1 in this village is decidedly the best schoolhouse in the state. Its dimensions are 43 by 70 feet and 2 stories high above the basement. It is a substantial brick building and well ventilated, the rooms in each story being 14 feet high in the clear. The first and second stories each contain a hall of about 50 by 40 feet. There are 4 recitation rooms, all conveniently arranged, a library room, 2 washrooms, etc. The seats are constructed on a new plan never before introduced into the West. The standards of the seats and desks are of cast iron and of a pattern which combines ornament with durability. The cost of the building thus far has been $4,500, and this does not include the lot where it stands. The lot was given to the district by S. Fisk Esquire and is valued at from $500 to $600. This is the Baptist Church. The first two Baptists who arrived in Pike were Cephas Weed and Hudson Bacon. They arrived on June 17, 1835. The first minister to arrive in Pike Creek was Elder Jason Lothrop on the schooner Detroit on August 15, 1835. The First Baptist Church of Southport, Wisconsin Territory was organized on March 12, 1838, being the third Baptist church in Wisconsin, others having been organized in Milwaukee and Sheboygan. The meeting at which the organization took place was held in the Log Schoolhouse, also known as the Block Schoolhouse. The first baptism was held Sunday, July 8, 1838, for Betsy Maria Lane, daughter of Selecta Lane. This church was constituted in September 1838. The elder Jason Lothrop was the first regular minister, and he served from November 2, 1839 to October 15, 1848. The first revival service was held in the Log Schoolhouse in 1840. On July 25, 1840, the group began looking toward a meeting house, and a motion was made requesting the trustees to inquire into the expediency of building. By 1843, progress was being made, as a lot was given conditionally on the street running north on the east side of the old courthouse, near the bank of the creek. Work on the building was started and brought to completion and dedicated on July 11, 1849. The structure cost $3,500, which was mostly paid for by the time it was dedicated. It was considered by many to be the handsomest structure for church services in the village.
This completes episode 2 in our history of Kenosha and Kenosha County. We are now leaving the 1840s. In other words, we've just about completed the pioneering stage of early Kenosha County history. I hope you'll join us for episode 3. This is your host, Ed Werner, saying thank you and good night.